UAP, unidentified anomalous phenomenon. Are they extraterrestrial, interdimensional, time travelers in origin, or are they simply a result of top-secret military projects, false flag alien invasions, PSYOP, drones, or other human-made aircraft? Join the discussion now on UAP Crossfire.
Welcome, everybody, to UAP Crossfire, where a bunch of alpha males get together. Yay, yes! Where a bunch of alpha males get together and try to decide the meaning of the universe. So far, we haven't been too successful. However, we will try. Hey, we got a great guest coming up today. His name is Bertrand. He's a mathematician, and he pretty much an aerospace, nautical pilot kind of guy. And Commander Cobra and him have already been talking off air about all this stuff that I haven't a clue what they're talking about. But
we're just doing a little hanger flying, Chris.
You're in a holding pattern? Is that what it is?
No, we're doing a little hanger flying.
What's a hanger flying?
Well, you know what flying is, right?
Yeah, I got.
And you know what a hangar is? That's where they keep the airplanes.
Yeah, but a hangar.
So when you're in the hangar and you're talking about flying, it's called hangar flying. And generally, our hands will go up like this, and stuff like that.
Usually, Italians do that, but
no, they do this.
Okay. Oh yeah. Anyways, where was I? Oh yes. So we're going to try to find out the meaning of the universe. We got a great guest coming on. He's absolutely fantastic. He's very interesting to talk to. I think Commander and him a great have thing. But I want to get back to last week. We had an outstanding guest last week with the person we had and the meaning of the universe. And people have been actually asking me, hey, I saw the show, and what did you think of that guy? And I guess he's a great guy. I just can't wrap my head around coming from an alien toilet. So, I mean, I'm just... this is pondering me really too much. And so I want to go around and says, what is your actual theory of life? And I want to go start with you, Padre. I already know, but I want the audience to get an idea of what your real feeling of how life was created and stuff, because there's so many theories out there. And that's the first time I ever heard of the flush and live kind of thing. So... Let's go with that.
Yeah, as I said last week, I believe in the beginning God created, not in the beginning God flushed. And that we have here the result of a creative, superior mind who made all things as they are. You know, this point is really the crux of the origin story, Chris, that you bring up. How does life come from non-life? And even diehard evolutionists will tell you that is the big problem. You can have all of the ingredients, but how do you get it to live? And they've been trying, for decades to try to make it in the laboratory and haven't been able to. And then you run into this problem of it's just the basic science of where in nature do we see a simple organism evolving into a complex organism. You can take all the parts to your car, Chris, and set them on the garage floor, but unless a mind is applied to put them into the right order and create a vehicle, they're just parts sitting there. And so I think, if you're at least honest, look at the origin stories across the world, they all say that there was a point at the beginning that life began, but it had help doing it. And of course, I believe in the Bible that we were created by a loving God, that each of us has the spark of his image inside of us, which is why we're supposed to love and respect one another. Because I just don't see, how do you get there? That's my problem.
Yeah. And see, that's the thing that I have a problem with some of these theories that are going on. There's two theories that, people have so many ideas, but nobody's really touched on one that you could say, wow, You know, that is really sharp. And one theory is like we were talking about, and I believe in you. I have the same feel as you are. I'm a spiritual person. I don't believe that the Big Bang Theory, that something exploded. First of all, how can something explode if there's nothing there? Commander, what is your theory?
Okay, so obviously I'm a Christian. I believe what the Padre has put out, but I'm going to try to when we're talking about our guest that was with us last week, Jeff Gould.
Yeah, Jeff was great.
He was great, and hopefully everyone is checking into his website, UAP Crossfire News. Great stuff, and he's been very kind to the show. So quickly back to it. What, without stepping on anybody's look, I agree as Dan put out, but I can't say that the Big Bang didn't happen, because I'm never going to put just a descriptor on what God did. This is where I have a lot of problems when people say, "Oh, that's it can't be that." I think it can be that, because that seems to me like a God type move for my puny little brain, that from nothing everything is created. So that part, you made that remark. The next part is this whole thing about the alien toilet that really has fascinated you.
Kept me up at night.
Well, and that's good. I mean, that's good. I could say something like "it depends" and turn this into like a dad's joke. If you catch me there, if you're stepping in what I'm laying down, hopefully you're not. But what I'm getting at is there are some in the science world that say this was organized, that people came here, planted the ingredients to make it go forward, and that's where it came from. And Jeff was expounding on the theory that it could have been because, as when we go off on a camping trip, we leave things behind. When people and animals have moved across the face of this planet, species, seeds have been moved. There has been interbreeding between different types of animals. So that's what I think he was driving at. And he thinks that it's probably a lot more probable that it happened in a much more accidental or understandable way than an organized way. I'm not expounding any theory. That's just, I want to make sure that I think I'm stating what Jeff was trying to say, why he thought that had more merit than when people say it's organized. With that said, I don't know how the Lord created this particular species of us, but I do know that in Genesis it says "in our image," and a lot of people go, "Well, what does that mean?" And Dan, the Padre, will correct me on this, but I always believed that was the Trinity that he was referring to when he talks about that,
right?
Or as it's recorded. And the other part is this, and I think the Bible is an incredible book of faith, and I think it's also an incredible record of actual fact. It has a lot of translations. It has a lot of historical rolling over on it. It has a lot of things in that. But if you understand from a faithful, as you say, Chris, a spiritual point, a lot of it makes sense. And there are things in the Bible. This is where I have had, I won't say big disagreements, but I've had fundamental people explain to me, because there's no ghosts in the Bible, they don't believe in ghosts. And I'm going, I don't quite get that. Because there's this Holy Ghost, which was the proper way to say it until the Holy Spirit name was upgraded. I guess it was a brand change. I sure hope God looks down upon us with a sense of humor with our nonsense as we come up with this. But whatever term you want to use. But we have visitations by angels. There's a lot of things there that completely fit in. And if you go back 2 guests, when we had LA on board, LA and I were able to fuse, and I think we've all agreed with it for years. There is a fusion of all these things. This is all interconnected. This isn't just one up. And this is one of the things that the different communities in the paranormal world are just as rough and tough as any denominational break that we have. I don't want to talk about ghosts. I'm a UFO person.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about Bigfoot because I'm a UFO person. I'm a cryptid guy.
Okay.
And all these happenstances of UAPs/UFOs being around cryptids, I don't want to talk about that. It doesn't fit my explanation. It's silly. It's nonsense.
Yeah.
It's not critical thinking. It's not looking at it. And I think it's a sign of the times that when you have folks that are actually entrenched on that, the one that I always give this complete community the absolute benefit of the doubt on, this may be the last vestiges of true freedom of speech and freedom of thought, because I have been in plenty, and the arguments have gotten a little bit heated, but everybody ended up being friends at the end. Yeah, sometimes some aspersions have been cast, but it will be debated. It will be talked about. Everybody will get a say. And God help us, and I mean that literally, if we lose that, because that's why shows like this, that's why sites like Jeff's
are important.
Hey, guys, I have to correct something that the commander said. I'm sorry, Commander, and that is the website, Jeff's website.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, it's uapnewscenter.com. That's UAP.
Did I say UAPcrossfire.com?
You said UAPnewscrossfire.com.
News Crossfire. Well, maybe he should change that. Maybe he should take a little hint.
I'm on it now, and it's still UAPnewscenter.com.
All right. Apparently, he's not taking suggestions from Commander Cobra. I'll have to work on him.
And Commander, you brought up something that I think needs to be talked about too before we bring our guest on, because seriously, and I'm being serious now, we have so many theories out there of what has been visiting us. Is it alien? Is it interdimensional? Is it demonic? Or is it some kind of spiritual?
Jehovah's
I mean,
Witnesses.
people are going in so many different directions. I mean, it just blows the mind. And I could say I agree with you. Somehow or another, it's all connected. Now, there are people I've had discussions with who said, "Oh yeah, well, I say I think there's a spiritual component to this." Wow, no, it can't be, because you can't see ghosts. The ghosts are really demons, and they disguise themselves as your mother and your father. If you see them, they're demons. And I'm like, well, okay, but if that's the case, give me some proof. Give me something that you can show me. And that's the problem with this theory.
Chris, I'm going to jump in real quick.
Yeah.
Hopefully the people that are listening tonight and the folks pick up the show. There was a made-for-TV drama called Distant Early Warning. It was based on a science fiction short story, and I think I am one of probably, I'd say, less than 1 million people in the country that remember seeing it. And I remember when I watched it. It was one of these kind of made-for-TV things, and it talks about, at a distant early warning site for the missiles, a UFO lands. These beings show up, and these beings are all the dead relatives of the people, the men at this missile site. Now, wow. It's incredible. And what it turns out is that they are ETs. They're not nice. Uh-oh. They scanned everybody's brains, and that's why they chose the form of dead relatives. And then they started expounding on all these theories about how heaven worked and all the stuff that was going on. And then you can probably catch the screenplay online. Here's an interesting thing about the show. It disappeared. The only copy of it, the videotape of it, has been lost forever. There's only parts and pieces. There's a very small group of us that meet online that talk about seeing the show and how we saw it and how it went on. But I urge you to take a look at it. Distant Early Warning, and it has a very interesting line on it.
All right. So what's your take on that then, Commander? Because
I think it's a possibility. If you think about it, it kind of fits, right? So if you I think that there's good extraterrestrials. I think there's bad extraterrestrials. I think that there is a spiritual component. Chris, you've talked about people who've called out the name of Jesus. Jesus Christ saved me. Jesus saved me in these moments, and they have been released. Right. They have escaped what has gone on that. I think to invoke that, though, you have to have a little spiritual skin in the game. You have to know something about it. I don't say that you have to be actively going to church and doing all those things, but I think if you truly have a pure heart and you know God and you call God, God's going to come to your aid on that. So I think that part of it's there. I think that there are other creatures in this universe that God created. I also think that when we talk about things like angels that are thrown to earth and the Nephilim and all the things that go on, all of that fits. The problem is, and our guest will understand when I say this, it's a lot like mathematics. Hint for the rest of the audience. Not everything that you come up with makes sense. In the 1950s, a very famous mathematician came up with a series of equations that everybody loved, but they couldn't figure out what they were for. They didn't have any practical use for them, but they did wonderful calculations with them. Everybody's, what does this mean? Where's he going with this? When we got into integrated circuits, when transistors came on and we started to build computers, these equations were used to help describe how long it would take for different calculations to be made by a computer. The calculations came, or the recognition came after they were created.
Okay, let me give you something here that's going to be kind of weird, but hear me out. The word inspiration we often use when somebody invents something new. An innovator comes up with something that nobody else has. He was inspired.
I have my hand up, Padre. Call on me. Call on me. Call on me.
That word means under the influence of the Spirit. Originally, it meant solely under the influence of the Holy Spirit, when the word we first find it in entomology. No, that's insects. Whatever. Anyway, I wanted to bring that to mind and just pose this question. If there are these entities out there and they have interacted with humanity before, and this is what L.A. Marzulli says, who is to say that they aren't there whispering something into the minds of people to help us along in a certain area for good or for evil? And, we've seen this in the movies. Mr. Scott in whatever that Star Trek movie with the whales was, he goes and enters into a computer the equation for transparent aluminum. And when he's accused of busting up Prime Directive, he says, well, they were going to figure it out anyway in 2 years. So I just helped them along a little bit. And I'm reading a very interesting biography, and you'll love me for this, Commander, John Boyd.
Oh, God.
Famous
I'm a long-time disciple of Boyd.
Yeah. Who revolutionized aviation and also air combat. Whole different kind. I mean, all the air forces in the world study him now with all his equations. But it tells about times that he would just go into a trance. And he'd be talking to somebody and he'd just lock up and he'd just be staring. And, he'd come back about a minute and a half later. And they said, well, what were you doing? You said, well, the numbers were coming into my head. And, who's to say that they can't implant things in our brains to make us see what they want to see? Or they can't give us a little nudge in one direction, one way or the other, for good or for evil. I mean, if they're there and throughout history they've been interacting with humanity, that would explain a lot, wouldn't it?
It would. And as we bring our guest on, Chris, I just want to say 42nd Boyd is the nickname for him. He was an incredibly gifted. But look up Colonel John or Johnny Boyd, and I would have everybody in the audience, if you really want an interesting to read, Creation and Destruction, one of his most important papers, his essays, available everywhere, doesn't cost you a cent. Creation and Destruction, John Boyd. Start there. The whole world will open up.
See, the reason I ask these questions, folks, is because I've been working with John Burroughs every week on the things that it's a fictional series, but however, it's really based on John Burroughs' experience in Rendlesham, and it's just an unbelievable story, and it makes me think about certain things that correlate with the UFO theory, because this is all interdimensional, part spirit, part Mother Earth, and it's not really a flying saucer coming down and little green or gray guys coming out of it. This is so much different from that, and it makes you think, because the series was put together so well. And I encourage everybody to go see the Green Veil, and really listen to this story about a fictional character called Jack Barrett, and it's based on John Burroughs, but the whole process of what really happened at Rendlesham, what he experienced there, and it will blow your mind. It blew my mind. I mean, every week I was like, you got to be kidding. And just the whole thing changed my ideas, starting to change my ideas about the ufology field and stuff. I actually think there is a strong component of interdimensional spiritual awakening that we're not privy to, but we're going to be privy to very shortly. At least
you need to pick up John's latest book. You just need
and stuff. Anyways, I want to get to our guest because our guest is coming on here. His name is Joshua Bertrand. He's a mathematics major, very well instructed in pilots and aircrafts, and he's done a lot of digging into stuffs like aerogel, which I'm a little familiar with, the secret of American lighter than air programs, a thing called LASH and the Nimitz incident, which I have no clue what that's about, and I guess apparently Eglin Air Force Base and the Apollo spacecraft. So let's bring Josh on. Josh? Well,
oh no,
he was with us a second ago.
Once upon a time, Josh was there, but he's not with us anymore. So, anyways, what's that? I'll sidestep to the right and sidestep to the left. Here he comes back on. Hello, Josh. How are you?
Hey, guys. Sorry for that. I think my video had frozen up while I was behind.
Yeah, the NSA is at work. They don't want you to talk.
You were behind the veil, so to speak.
Quick reboot, and we're golden.
So, Josh, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself? How did you get into the UFO field and everything?
Sure. So my name is Joshua Bertrand. Background, I graduated from the University of Waterloo in 2002 with a degree in mathematics and honors computer science. I worked in industry, mainly computer science, working on database software and for a brief time video games at Electronic Arts. In my retirement, I've decided to look into the big question of our times, which is UFOs, UAP, and the potential technologies that are hiding behind some of these encounters. I think that every encounter needs to be looked at individually because over time, our technology has changed, and I think that that's been expressed in what's being cited in some of these UAP incidents. So I've spent quite a bit of time, almost a decade, analyzing it, putting together data, cross-referencing points, and looking into the secret programs that DARPA and the US military and the Department of Energy have been progressing with our tax dollars. I am a Canadian citizen, but I am also an American citizen. So as a dual, I am also aware of the responsibilities of Congress to have oversight on where our tax dollars are being spent. And in my research, I have definitely found programs that were withheld from congressional oversight, and I'm trying to restore that through my work.
That's awesome. I want to talk a little bit first DARPA, and then I'll hand it over to my co-host. What do you see DARPA's biggest problems in some of the things that they're doing?
I think the biggest problem right now with DARPA is that the program that for quite a while was actually fairly secure. For about 50 years from the 1956 Atomic Energy Act until about the 2000s, most of the programs that were being worked on in America, if we wanted to keep them secret, none of our enemies were getting into those programs. I think the big issue for DARPA right now is that it's gotten very porous. We're accepting a lot of foreign scientists into these programs, and about 5 to 10 years later, we end up seeing direct copies of the advanced technologies that have been funded with American taxpayer dollars through DARPA showing up in the arsenals of our enemies.
China, basically.
China, Russia, Iran, they're all working together. China buys oil from Russia and Iran. China sends technology, arms, and money back, and the Iranians and the Russians fight wars with them. It's a proxy system, so in my mind, they're all working together. The Chinese, the Russians, and the Iranians are all in a petro alliance right now.
Wow, okay. So I just wanted to let everybody know that Bob Spearing's going to join us. He's our surprise guest, substitute co-host. Bob, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? Can you guys hear me okay?
Right. Yeah,
Yep.
I can hear you great. Just for disclosure reasons, Bob is the person that actually introduced me to Josh. Josh and I had a great talk, and I said, wow, I'd really like to bring you on this program because, you know, a lot of people don't realize about DARPA or some of the other military flight equipment and stuff that we have, except for Commander Cobra, which is, I thought, would be a great thing between Josh and Commander. So, Commander, the floor is yours.
Well, no arguing with Josh. The problem with DARPA is approximately a decade to maybe 2 decades back, they officially transitioned to open source technology. It started in the 80s, I remember, because I was working on my master's in those days, and it was an ongoing complaint because my master's was done while I was stationed in Europe, and it was a series of different military bases that you'd go to for your courses. So that was always the complaint. Now, the reason that they did that, officially and unofficially, was, well, you can move things much faster. You could take different types of chances, experimentation. You could bring up young, very upstart companies. Remember, this is really when it started in the 80s. We're just starting to really break into things like GPS. The stuff that Josh was starting his career on was just starting to take off on the computer science wise. And computer science went from being kind of a data processing to an ability to actually do intelligent design type work. You could put in elements and get that. His work is the roots of things that we talk endlessly about, with not a lot of intelligence behind it, like digital engineering. Digital engineering is a key component to the picture of the airplane behind me. And if you look at a B-21 digital engineering was incredibly important. What that means is we have the computer power now that you can put the flight parameters into it, and the pilots that are going to go out and fly it and test fly it can go out and start flying it in the computer in a simulator, sometimes a desktop, sometimes a little bit more advanced than that. But in the case of the B-21, when they came up with areas that seemed to be a problem, they went back, again, using a lot of computer number crunching, and started to make changes based on what they had started out with to what they ended up with. And that's why that program is unbelievably successful. It's probably one of the most important airplanes we're going to see in our lifetimes is out flying around. And as they say, when you have one, it's a science experiment. When you have two, you have a program. And the second one's on the flight line with it. You know a few of the people involved with it. Incredible project. So DARPA, yes, a lot of breakthroughs. Also, a lot of leaks, as Josh put, a lot of SIBs. Also, it's an entryway. But I'm going to be a little bit sinister here. I think sometimes it's just pure greed. You have people that will sell out their own country, and they can justify that in their minds, and they'll let stuff go. We can also have very sloppy procedures because we live in an open society, and we can be just plain stupid about stuff. So those things are factors in there. But sometimes we put stuff out intentionally to get flaws into certain things. Certain things will go out, and we won't talk about corrections that were made later. And that happens. But I'm not going to put a lot of money down on that particular category for what's going on. I think it's still pretty sinister and pretty bad planning on our part for letting a lot of stuff out. But we are in there, and there's a reason that the Russians or then Soviets, now Russians, had a series of airplanes that looked a lot like ours in the 80s and 90s. And that's why a few months later, the F-35 has a J-35 that looks a lot like it. but it doesn't have all quite the same things. If you go back to my earlier example, the Chinese People's Republic of China copy of the F-35 does not have internal weapons base. They carry everything on the outside. Huge problem for stealth. It gave up a lot of stealth, and their stealth copy isn't that too good. Good friend of mine who's out at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base talks about when they put the different airplanes that have been retired to the museum, they have to go in there and dumb them down a little bit, and they have caught people from China, just happy to get the T-shirt from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, the Air Force National Museum of Air Force, and they're awfully close, and they're taking very, very detailed pictures, and they knew that. So when they put those into displays, they purposely messed them up a little bit so they would not be an easy technology transfer.
Do you think, Commander, and I'll say this both to Josh and you, I want to ask you both the same question. Why is DARPA knowing what we know about this now? Why haven't we tightened up the security for this?
Well, in my opinion, it starts at the top in Congress, both houses. It starts with the what administration's in, and we've had some pretty lax administrations. And I'm going pretty much everything since the time of Reagan. And to me, that's been fairly much downhill. So that's part of the reason. A lot of times it's just a drive to make breakthroughs in technology. I think that the idea of opening up capitalism into the PRC had very good hearts to that somehow we were going to get the cat out of the bag and they were just going to eat it up and they were just going to go with it, and they have to a great extent. That has really shaken things up, but we are very slow to react to who our enemy is, and the Cold War really goofed us up. And what screwed us up at the end of the Cold War is we thought everything was done. Soviet Union had failed. Russia was coming out. We had this thing called the peace dividend, and we absolutely threw ourselves right on our backsides when we did that.
Yeah, really did. Padre.
Hi. No, I have some questions pertaining to innovation and new materials. A few years ago, all the rage was over something called graphene, and that was going to be this super strong, super light, ultra conductor, and we don't hear about that anymore. Joshua, as you look at the landscape of innovation right now, what do you think? Let's kind of keep it to the aerospace industry. What do you think are the most exciting things that are surfacing and being worked on?
Well, you're going to love this because graphene is one of the exciting things that I think is relevant to aerospace. One of the things that I've brought forth is this project out of Los Alamos National Labs known as the aerogel lighter than aircraft. It's a shell of aerogel made of polyimide aerogel, which contains a vacuum chamber on the inside. So when you evacuate, here's pilot hands. When you evacuate the inside of this craft, it can act as a balloon without requiring the traditional filling of hydrogen and helium that most lighter than air balloons do. It stays as a rigid balloon. It's made of polyimide, and where your graphene enters the situation is an innovation out of Rice University, where in polyimide, you can actually laser print electronics by turning the polyimide into graphene with a laser. So if you think of traditional electronic microchips, they use what's known as lithography to design these chips and print these chips, which uses a laser on silicon to embed all of the microscopic components that end up giving the chip its function. Now, the interesting thing here with these lighter than air polyimide aerogel balloons is that if you use that laser-induced graphene, you can print the electronics directly into the body, the hull, of this craft itself. So you're printing electronics into a sphere made of chemicals. You don't require the traditional filling with hydrogen or helium. So you've actually got a very cheap craft that, if you can produce these en masse, can function as both offensive and reconnaissance drones in a swarm. And since they're not requiring traditional electronics, metals, and production methods, it has the opportunity to drastically shift this aerospace field if these come into effect. Because if you can print, like, eventually a $10 couple chemicals drone, produce them out in a swarm and send them up against your enemy, well, it doesn't matter how many planes they have. If they encounter a swarm of these objects that are getting sucked into their engines, they're not going to last very long against it. That is one of the interesting aerospace concepts that's coming along, and there's the tie-in for graphene as well.
You spoke of it as a rigid balloon. How can you maneuver them, or what is the propulsion on these things?
So you can add external propulsion to them, akin to a normal drone. You can add propellers or a jet engine to these drones and have it fly around like that. But the truly interesting avenue of this technology is that the aerogel can be heated up with these imprinted electronics. And when you heat up aerogel, it can act as a pump itself. So if you have this vacuum chamber and have the ability to heat up specific parts of its external hull, it can cause air to be either expelled from the internal vacuum chamber or drawn into the vacuum chamber from the directions that would induce travel with that motion of air through the craft itself. And this can also be done multi-medium. So when I'm saying that you can suck air into the craft by heating up specific portions of its hull, you can do the same thing underwater. So it would allow you to have this multi-medium craft that is functioning pretty much independently with no fuel sources other than maybe imprinted solar panels on the top of the craft itself, which would give it the power. And graphene can also act as a high charge battery, so you're able to store the charge in the craft itself as well.
There was an article today on the Warzone website showing their new remotely operated blimp drone for anti-submarine warfare. Bill, do you have that picture that we could put up on that I sent you? Anyway, it looks like, they say it's like 12 meters long, and it looks, there it is. That's it on maneuvers over Finland. They've been experimenting with these as platforms for electronic surveillance and looking for submarines and keeping an eye on ships and so on and so forth. With what you were just talking about, do you envision something like that being made out of these aerogel materials?
Yeah, so if you have that craft, do you recall how long the craft was itself?
The size of a bus.
12 meters, I think they said.
Okay, so at 12 meters long, that thing's going to take about $10,000 or more of helium to fill up. And anytime you want to descend that craft, you're going to have to vent that helium, and then it just goes out into the atmosphere and rises up to the top of our atmosphere and hangs out in space. The nice thing with these vacuum craft, they don't require that helium, and they can be rather small. So instead of having a 12-meter long silver reflective blimp floating above you, if you get one of these maybe 5 foot wide spheres that's floating at 10,000 feet, well, you put a camera on that and it's going to be able to see what's going on the ground, but are you on the ground going to be able to see a 5-meter sphere floating above you 100,000 feet? And the answer is pretty much no. Maybe with a really good camera, you'll be able to pick it out, but it gives you an asymmetry where if you have a mesh network of these sphere drones that is conducting reconnaissance, well, eventually you're going to be able to produce enough of them that they're going to be able to conduct reconnaissance on the entire planet. And they're going to do it a lot cheaper than sending satellites up into orbit. You can have these things floating in the atmosphere, and they'll also get a better image of the ground than that satellite because they're not looking through all of Earth's atmosphere. So I think that this may be where those reconnaissance blimps are eventually going. And it's been a program that has been worked on by elements of the U.S. government since 1905.
Right.
We've been working on blimps and balloons continuously for 100 years. And I've heard a couple people say, oh, well, these modern UAP can't be blimps and balloons because they went the way of the stagecoach. But that's false. Through the
How do they
90s.
get their speed, though, Josh?
Pardon?
How do they get their speed? How would they? I mean, I was going to ask you, give us the history of aerogel, but you just struck a thing. So these vacuum type of balloons, how are they able to I guess, maneuver and speed of what?
Well, without external propulsion, I don't think that these move very fast at all. They're designed mainly for station keeping. So you put out a bunch of them, and as a mesh reconnaissance on an area, they're not follow targets. They're staying over a single area and just looking down and staying on station. So we have seen some blimps and balloons through these DARPA programs that were designed for speed and for carrying cargo and all that. They have external engines on them right now. If it's moving or moving fast, it has an external engine.
I want to get into the history of aerogel because I was lucky enough to be able to see a sample of piece of metal that had quite a bit of aerogel in it, part of the composite. Yeah, thanks. Bob Spearing sent it to me. It's a piece of metal that came from Russia. It was analyzed that has a lot of aerogel in it. And basically, I was waiting for the FBI to come knocking at my door because I had no idea that Bob was sending it to me. But anyways, can you explain what aerogel is?
This is a piece of aerogel that I have. It's rather light. It sounds funny if you tap it.
It's a gas made into a solid, right?
Yeah, it's a material that was a gel at one point, but has had all of the water removed through a supercritical drying process.
And it's supposed to be very strong. Is that what it is and stuff?
Some of them are, some of them aren't. So depending on what the aerogel is made of, it can have different properties. As Dan was mentioning earlier, you can actually make aerogel out of graphene, which ends up becoming a substance called aerographene, which itself is actually slightly conductive. You can also have the polyimide aerogels like are used in the balloons. And since they're resisting the pressure of a balloon, that this is actually rather strong. I'm trying to bend it and getting a very, very slight curve with the pressure that I can apply from my hands, but I can't break this. Like I've tried, I've hit it with a hammer. It leaves a little bit of a dent, but it didn't break. When you talk about aerogels with most people, they're familiar with the traditional blue aerogel, which is actually rather fragile. If you drop that on a table, most of the time it'll actually fracture.
Yeah, it shatters.
So it shatters.
Yeah, depending. Some of them do, yeah. So depending on the material that it's made from and the processes that were used, they can have remarkably different properties, which is why it's such a fascinating expansion to the aerospace field.
And then you start getting into shapes. The shape of it can start giving it structural strength. It's, when you start looking at eggs, eggs can take incredible amount of pressure in one direction, top to bottom, not so much from the side.
Are you saying that the Tic Tacs could possibly be made of aerogel in ours?
I don't think the Tic Tac was in 2002, but I think that as we progress through the next decade, you will start to see aerogel tubes and cylinders being made because, as you're saying, that gives inherent structural rigidity by being a sphere or a rounded cylinder to distribute the stresses that the object will come under. Because if you're trying to hold a vacuum inside of a solid object, you've got all of the pressure of the outside atmosphere pushing in and trying to get into that vacuum space. And so you do need a rigid structure and a rigid material to hold that pressure. In the 1600s, when they first talked about these vacuum spheres or vacuum
Josh, you're jumping on it. I was getting ready to talk about Francisco Lana de Terzi. I can't believe
Lana de Terzi was talking about these centuries ago, and at the time he was postulating that they would be an iron sphere that held the vacuum on the inside.
I have the picture behind my head now. I brought it up. It's the spheres on the ship, and his theory was that if he could evacuate all the air, it would push the spheres up, and a ship would float in the air.
And he was right, except they didn't have the materials at the time.
They had to make them so thin that they collapsed.
Yeah.
But his mathematics, he really is, and in 1600s, he is considered a Jesuit priest, the father of aeronautics, because mathematically he proved a lot of the things that were there, and he laid a lot of the groundwork down.
Yeah, de Terzi, I think, was followed shortly thereafter by Bartolomeo de Gusmão, who had the Passarola airship in the 1600s, and then the Montgolfiers in the 1800s, and Danilewski in Ukraine in 1890s. They all had these airships.
I think of Mrs. Crandall, my third grade math teacher. You're throwing these names out. I go, pal, she's the only woman that ever hit me with a ruler, for God's sakes.
You deserved every inch of it. Get it? Oh, hey, I had to go there. Come on. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, that's okay. But I just said,
watch Josh's face when I say this. Watch his face. Mathematics is as easy as pie. Okay?
Yeah.
Happy Pi Day every March.
That's why I was a cop and not a brain surgeon.
Don't worry, Chris. I'm not going to give a quiz at the end of this, and people are free to listen back through it a couple times. And if I'm dropping 100 names, put the names into Google and look it up.
Or drop me an email and I'll hook you up. I have everything hooked up.
I'm on X as Korea_UFO. I have open DMs. So if anyone wants to ask questions about something that I didn't go into enough, feel free to just shoot me a line over there.
So before I turn it over to Bob, because Bob's got an interesting story about aerogel and the Russian sample, I wanted to ask you, what does Monsanto involvement have with it? You put in here that Monsanto has an involvement with aerogel?
Oh, yeah. So I don't know how much Bob wanted to talk about, but maybe I'll just start it off here. So
yeah, go ahead.
If we go to the origins of aerogel, how it was invented, how it was reverse engineered, if that's what happened, there's a man named Kistler in the 1930s, and he puts out a paper in Nature magazine that describes aerogels for the first time. And he hasn't just created one type of aerogel, he's created aerogels out of a whole range of materials. So he has aerogels made out of metals, aerogels made out of chemicals. He took an egg and he turned the egg into an aerogel by removing all of the water from the egg in his own process, which at the time involved alcohol, I think, to remove the water from the sol gel stage of the egg. His prior credit of the invention is to gas flow theory, which came out only a few years before. Both of those theories rely on, I believe, them having an existing sample that they are reverse engineering. Now, this isn't in any of the documentation, but there isn't documentation. If you go to Kistler's lab notes, he pretty much comes onto this theory from the gas flow theory and nowhere else. And the gas flow theory comes from one of those inspirations that Dan was talking about earlier. We don't have the prior scientific chain leading up to it. It just enters as a technology as a whole on its own. So there is confusion about where that original invention came from, whether it was full inspiration of just Kistler on his own, or whether he was perhaps reverse engineering something. Once his paper comes out, Kistler and the US government license aerogel to Monsanto. So Monsanto takes, in 1940, the aerogel patent from Kistler and has the sole production for it. And they make, I think, 6 or so different variants of aerogel. One of them is called Santo Cell, and they're using them to cool down industrial parts. So if you have a rivet for welding and you want to shrink the rivet so that it fits in a rivet hole, they would store it in a container of Santo Cell made by Monsanto to compress the steel of the rivet before it's put in. And this aerogel, for the first time as a refrigerant, allows them to do this process on industrial sites in the 1940s. So that's sort of how Monsanto entered it. By 1956, control is given back to the Department of Energy, and aerogel is exclusively being researched by Los Alamos National Labs, Redstone Arsenal, and Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So interesting crossover of those 3 sites with the UAP UFO phenomenon as well. And this is sort of what they, I think, have been working on the whole time. If you go into a lot of the lore of third-party contractors that have worked on recovered UAP parts, a lot of those recovered UAP parts end up having described similar properties as aerogel. There's a man named Richard Bandurich, who's a whistleblower that came out of Lockheed, and he describes Lockheed having a material that when you put it on a hot plate of 3,000 degrees, absorbs the heat from the hot plate and cools the hot plate itself down. And that's actually one of the properties that aerogel has. So when he described that material, instant blink in my brain saying, oh, Bandurich was working on recovered aerogel.
Can aerogel be used for exit and entry into outer space?
One of the Mars landers used a heat shield that was made out of aerogel to enter Mars's atmosphere. So it's very good at dissipating heat, and there's these things called tektites. Sorry for jumping around a little bit,
No,
but
go
it
ahead.
is relevant to your
I
question.
lost you at your name, so go right ahead.
That's okay. People listen back and maybe put it all into Grok, and maybe the AI will figure out what I'm talking about.
I'm going to put everything you say in the AI because I can't figure it out, but go ahead, my friend.
So there's these items known as tektites, which is a form of silica glass meteor. And this silica glass meteor is got a lot of tiny pores in it. And one of the things that makes an aerogel is that it is also filled with all of these tiny pores, which is how the material gets its light weight. Tektites form naturally in our cosmos, and when they rain down on the planet, they can actually survive re-entry because they're made of this pure silica. And in the tiny pores that are inside of the tektite, when it comes through the planet's atmosphere, genetic material that is trapped in the pores of a tektite can survive re-entry to Earth. So if you had a tektite that was formed, let's say, on Mars, and genetic material got trapped in that tektite when it's forming, and that tektite gets kicked off of Mars and flies through space and ends up crashing down to Earth, the genetic material from Mars that was trapped in those pores will have been successfully protected both from interstellar space and cosmic rays and from the re-entry to Earth's atmosphere. And we'll now we have found tektites that when you cut them open have genetic material in them that has come from space. So
Josh, hold on to that thought because we got to take a break. And when we come back, I want to finish up your thought and then bring Bob Sperry and talk about MUFON's aerogel that they did and they analyzed and the whole bit. So, folks, we're going to be right back after this commercial from KGRADB. All right, we are back at UAP Crossfire having a great conversation with our guest tonight, Joshua Bertrand, and also Bob Sperry, the MUFON's International Director for everything that goes on outside the United States. He's a great guy, too. Anyways, all right, Josh, finish up your thoughts before we get to Bob.
I think that my tektite talk was actually because started to talk. So, Bob, how about you tell them about aerogels that might have been in space?
Okay, so I want to go back and add some points that Josh was trying to make that I don't think he got a chance to hit on. When I've had many conversations with Josh, he's told me about a lot of the things that these aerogel vacuum balloons might do. And he mentioned lasers. And he told me at one point that if you're able to strike the aerogel with the laser, say from a ground-based laser or a space-based laser, you can push it along because it absorbs heat. And some of these can go incredibly fast, if I'm correct, like really fast. And I sent Chris over 2 videos of what we call fast movers that are in the MUFON database. I sent you an email, Chris. Maybe we might get them up later. But also, aerogel's very porous. And Josh told me it's sort of like the divots in golf balls, all right, that actually make the vacuum balloons go very, very fast because the holes in a golf ball are designed to make it go faster and further. All right. Also, aerogel has a stealth property to it. It's very hard to detect. It's got a very low friction rate, which is why it can cut through the atmosphere very easily as a craft. And just to finish up with Monsanto, the creepier part of this is why did Monsanto want this? All right. Allegedly, they're an agricultural company. They used it for some sort of refrigeration. When Kistler went on a hiatus from teaching in 1929. He went to Europe for a semester, and when he comes back after meeting with Einstein, this is everything that Josh has told me. This is when he comes out with aerogel. He tries initially to sell it to DuPont, another interesting company, and he ends up selling it to Monsanto. Now, if we go ahead, Josh and Greg Sisko, one of our photo analysts at MUFON, directed me to Lou Elizondo's book, Imminent, because I forget if it's page 113 or 131, Elizondo talks about the legacy groups going back into the 1930s. And one of the legacy groups is Monsanto. And according to Elizondo, Monsanto had dead alien bodies as early as 1930. And the last point I want to bring up, it's Monsanto is in deep, all right?
Wow.
The last point is, let's say it was reverse engineered. Okay, where did they get the reverse engineered material? And Josh came up with one case, and I found another one thanks to Alberto Rosales, who does those humanoid series of books. Josh thinks it may have come from the 1897 Aurora, Texas craft, because, as you know, many TV shows have gone into that well looking for material, and they never found it. And chances are, if it was an aerogel, they wouldn't have known what they're looking for and maybe just passed it up, all right? There's a second case from 1922 where people in the Midwest saw this object coming down, crashed into trees, and what was interesting about it was they never found the pilot, and in most of these vacuum balloon objects, they don't need a pilot. And the other thing was it had no engine, and that's very prominent in the newspaper article that describes this crash. So what was this machine? They call it a machine that came down from the sky that had no engine. Well, it has all the characteristics of an aerogel vacuum balloon, okay? So did Kistler actually get a sample and reverse engineer it, and that's what led him to create the aerogels today. And today we have graphene aerogels.
I think, did we lose Bob? The NSA must have took him off.
Man overboard. Man overboard.
Man overboard. Anyways, so Josh,
You can only mention a graphene aerogel twice in a stream before you get cut off.
you get cut off. So anyways, I wanted to ask you, because I'm going to bring Bob, I was going to ask about the Russian sample, but the thing I was going to go on to the next thing, I wanted Commander to jump in. The Commander convinced me that the Tic Tacs were ours. He brought up this theory about a year ago, Commander, saying, no, Chris, I really believe the Tic Tacs are ours. If you look at our technology, look the way we're going, those Tic Tacs were ours. And people were saying, no, they would never fly those type of things, around our jets or anything. But you did some actual investigative into the Tic Tac incidents. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, sure. So I've done some videos before with Simon Holland, who's another great UAP researcher and YouTuber. And one of the points that he brings up, which is very astute, is that the Nimitz incident occurred in a training area where the area is under strict control, but it's also used as a testing area. So if there was a test of domestic U.S. technology going on, that would be where that test would occur. And if you wanted to test it against the best pilots in the U.S. Air Force, and granted it's incredibly hazardous, and if someone made this decision, I do not agree with it because of that hazard. But if you wanted to test these craft out for the first time against the best pilots that we have, David Fravor was that best pilot at the time. So you could theoretically notify his commander, the commander of the Nimitz task group, that this test was occurring. You could conduct this test against the radar systems of the Nimitz and the Princeton for about a week. And Kevin Day's testimony, he was the radar operator on the Princeton, says that for the preceding week before Fravor flew, they had been seeing these objects going up and down in their training area, multiple objects. So not just one Tic Tac, there were multiple of them. And they're always described as going up and down. So when Fravor encounters this white cylinder, he's seeing one object, and he goes down to the object and says that it exits his scene going up. He doesn't, in his testimony, he does not ascribe any fantastic speeds to the object. He's later contacted by communications and informed that the radar has seen another object, or this same object, show up at their cap point, which is a distance away.
Right, those are classified points.
Yeah, so how would an alien know where that is? But if there was a test going on, the testing people would very well have access to that information. The fantastic speeds of these objects are ascribed later by a man named Kevin Knuth, who's also a mathematician like me. But he's making an assumption that the object that exited the area above Fravor is the same object that about a minute or a couple seconds later shows up at their cap point. Well, from the testimony of Kevin Day, we know that there's multiple of these objects in the area. So that assumption by Knuth that gives the fantastical speed to this Tic Tac object is just that. It's an assumption. He's assuming that the object that's leaving Fravor is traveling at fantastic speeds to show up at the cap point, whereas we know that the Nimitz can only see up to 80,000 feet. And we know that aerostats, airships, can travel well above 100,000 feet. So if an aerostat has left the scene above Fravor and another aerostat has been deployed by a submarine below the cap point, interpolating those as the same object is the only thing that's given fantastic speed to these. And I think that people need to think back on this incident and realize that there were multiple objects. This could have been an encounter with multiple objects, and no one directly observed any of these objects traveling at a fantastic speed. So, what
would be the propulsion system, Josh?
I believe
lasers, but I mean, how would lasers be able to do that without the ships knowing? You know, the crew knowing.
So I actually have looked into this, and I think I know the exact airship tech that was being used and tested in San Diego in 2002 to 2006. And it's an item called the LASH, the Littoral Airborne Sensor Hyperspectral. And what this is it's a sensor that's attached to a balloon, and the sensor looks down on the ocean and provides a heads-up display to a submarine that has launched this aerostat from under the water. So there is no propulsion to it. It is tethered to the submarine, and all it does is rise by buoyancy, and if they want to bring it back down, they tether it back down. So I don't think we're ever going to get resolution as to what this specifically was until there's more hard evidence, because we would need to see the radar tapes to confirm whether the objects were traveling at speeds that are consistent with a tethered balloon, or whether there were truly objects that were going from 80,000 feet to sea level in a second. So the tapes might show it. The tapes are what people should push for.
Commander, what do you think of that theory of land?
I don't disagree with anything Josh said. I don't think that completely explains everything that happened to Tic Tac. I don't know Commander Fraser's, I don't know him directly. I know people that he flew with, people that were in squadrons with him in the past. Absolute knots on square guy. I mean, nothing going on there. just to keep the peace in the family. This was the Navy, not the Air Force. Josh said the best Air Force pilots. Oh, there were screams and anchors being thrown from the side a few minutes ago. So we want to make sure we get that straightened out. This is the age of Top Gun Maverick, so we need to make sure we catch up with it. My theory varies from that. I think that there is a very strong possibility what Josh talked about is part of it. I don't think that explains everything that happened with the vehicles. I had that interview on my show years back with the guys that were on the Princeton. The whole Men on Black routine of people showing up, collecting tapes. The whole thing just has this was an exercise that ran. There's no doubt in my mind about it. And it was done in a very public way because I think we want to let other people in the world know something about our technology and some of the things that are going on. With all that said, there's behaviors that have gone on here that are very classically military. Even straight up as Josh is talking about with the balloon coming up from the sub. During World War II, the Germans used kites on their U-boats, and they would put a young sailor up in the seat. He would be underneath it. The kite would lift him up, and he'd go up a couple hundred feet, and he was able to, with a key, tell him what he could see, binoculars, and they used that as a way to visually look around and spot targets. Nothing new. Just like the aerosol, just like we're trying to have these spheres, these things come up. I'm going to turn this over to Padre, but Josh, I want you to circle into this. One of the things when you throw in the business that happened off Eglin, part of the country that I'm very familiar with, being stationed along that area over the years. One of the things that's interesting is in the Eglin event, we have 4 of them flying in a diamond formation. Now, maybe ET really likes the Thunderbirds, the Air Force demonstration team, or the Blue Angels, which is based out of Pensacola, not a long distance, and they're just emulating what they saw with those airplanes. But to me, when I see and hear things like that, that tells me it's a very classical setup to a military type basis that's going on there. Those are the kinds of extra margin things that I see happening there that tell me what you're catching, what's being witnessed. And when anything happens during the day, like this, I know that if it's not classical extraterrestrial kind of behavior, this is the military up to something. They're looking for how easily is it penetrated, because it's not happening over Moscow. It's not happening over Paris. It's happening in restricted zones, offshore areas where some of the airspace is controlled, where airliners are not going through that airspace, and you have high level of activity of other military jets.
I completely agree, Commander. Yeah, Cobra, I completely agree. And one of the other things from the Eglin case.
Well, this is turning into a mathematician's love fest. So, I mean, we're going to get emails.
Technologists. Okay. We're not digging too deep down into the math, but I'm definitely digging into the technology quite a bit. The thing with the Eglin incident, and I think it's called the Eglin Apollo spacecraft UAP. And as you said, they saw 4 of these objects that were flying in formation. This video was actually the video that was shown to Congresswoman Luna, Congressman Tim Burchett, and former Congressman Matt Gaetz when they attempted to go to Eglin Air Force Base and get answers out of the base's commander. They were able to see this video, but the commander then excused himself. And if I remember the analogy correctly, the people in the room said they're going to applaud the commander for that one. And he actually left the base so that the Congress people could not obtain further answers. Now, I think the they, and they're going to love that, are the people that were conducting that technology test, because they've given perfect cover for their technology test by having these people, or these Congress people, believe that it's aliens. The technology that I believe that they were specifically testing there is what's known as the DARPA Organic Air Vehicle Demonstrator. And this is a program that was funded through Honeywell, which is one defense contractor, and BAE Systems, which is a UK defense contractor. And the program was intended to design a drone out of a single ducted jet fan engine. So if you can imagine the engine at the back of the F-22, if you take all of the F-22 off of that engine and just have the engine itself and a sophisticated drone controller attached to it, that engine doesn't have the weight of a pilot, it doesn't have the weight of the wings or all of the structure of the plane, so it can travel extremely fast and extremely nimbly. And they've been developing this, and it's been called the Organic Air Vehicle. Now, this program went dark in 2005 and supposedly was canceled, but it continued being funded in secret. And I believe that it was what was being tested at Eglin Air Force Base. And sure enough, last month, BAE Systems, I guess having finished their testing at Eglin, has started to market these single ducted jet fan drones as the Kestrel. And that's a new drone from them, but it is the Organic Air Vehicle from 2005 that was funded by DARPA and the American taxpayer and is now going to be sold back to the Department of War by a British company. So we paid for this technology to be developed. We lied while it was being tested against our own pilots. And now the shareholders of a British company are going to benefit from all of that technology.
Well, there's a lot of American and Canadians that invest in BAE North America as well.
Yeah.
So it's not a complete wash of the money. And
it's just an example of how the system works.
Oh, but you're talking about things like Five Eyes get into this. I mean, there's a lot of facets on this jewel. The point is, it is very subtly thrown in there, and I'm going to underscore it. Congress jumped on this, and they jumped in on with the indignation. And I saw a remark by one of the reps that said, seems very strange that 4 aircraft would be flying in a diamond formation. It must be extraterrestrial. You need to stop talking when you say something like that. One of the aforementioned reps, when the F-35 crashed, they lost it on radar. And they don't know where it is. That's when the pilot ejected and then it continued to fly. Well, thank God they couldn't track it on radar. That's why we spent the billions upon billions of dollars to develop it. I mean, get some people on your staff or call me or call Josh, and I'll give you an explanation why they couldn't track it on radar, why the F-35 and the F-22 fly with little add-ons to the wingtips and wing roots so they can be tracked on radar, why F-15s escorted the B-2 when it flew over Britain for one of the big celebrations in the air show, because it can't be seen. If it could be tracked, then we really have wasted time and money. But we don't critically think on this. And they took it hook, line, and sinker, and it goes back to the 60s. The Air Force quickly figured out that if you could fan the flames of UFO enthusiasm, you could get away with a lot. Maybe even murder, Chris, since that comes up every now and then. Padre, jump in here. I know you're ready to go.
I just sent to Bill, our producer, a picture of the Kestrel. If you want to pull that up, please, Bill, that shows this is their organic air vehicle that Josh was talking about, and their ducted propulsion system. What are we looking at here, Josh? Can you kind of explain what this picture is? It looks like really weird.
Sure. So I'll go from the bottom up. So at the bottom, you can see there's 4 black sticks with white spheres at the end of them. Those are just, I believe, the landing gear of the drone itself.
It might just be launch only too, Josh.
Yeah.
I have a feeling a lot of these are expendable.
that might stay behind on the ground, and the rest of the drone above it is what functions as the actual drone in the air. So the black part is a single engine, and I believe that one is just a fan. However, they have been doing these organic air vehicles with jet engines as well. Above that, the two structures that are sticking up are just for aerodynamics. So you have a single fan and some aerodynamic elements, and that is all the drone is. Now, I believe that what they saw at Eglin Air Force Base was one of the militarized versions, because they noted that it had a riveted metal appearance on the outside. So if you imagine that Kestrel drone that we just saw, and you rivet a cylinder around it, what that cylinder is going to do is it's both going to act as protection for the drone, and it's going to act as a funnel to funnel air into the jet engine. So when they saw this Apollo spacecraft riveted thing flying in formation near Eglin Air Force Base, underneath that riveted metal, I believe, was a single ducted fan engine similar to the Kestrel.
Might, instead of riveted metal, might it have just been some kind of a thin plastic or
or
aluminum
plastic
foil
metamaterial
for deception purposes, just to make people not understand what they were looking at?
It could have been for deceptive purposes, but the ducting around those drones actually does help them function better. It acts as a funnel for the air.
It's an airflow.
It's feeding. Yeah.
And you mentioned that the protruding things that look like cones coming up on either side were for aerodynamic reasons. Might they be housing electronics or avionics or something for surveillance?
You would be able to add cameras and other sensors to this drone. Yeah,
They definitely look like payload positions of some kind.
Payload mounts as well. Yeah.
I'm gonna jump in real quick. I'm gonna say to Kentucky Skywatcher, I'm tracking your questions. Drop me an email, and I'll give you my explanation why to some of your remarks that you had there in the chat room. We may not get to it tonight on TikTok, but in short, I think that Tic Tac was playing around. It was done as a wave the flag, rattle the saber type thing. It was also an evaluation. I think the balloon that Josh was talking about, as well as what I consider a vehicle of advanced capabilities, highly expensive, probably very detrimental to the people that were involved flying it. I'm convinced it was manned. And an advanced technology that was being used for its propulsion comes at a high price. But I'll give you some more explanation if you want to drop me an email on it.
That image.
I think you're muted, Chris.
Sorry about that. I want to pivot a little bit. I wanted to bring Bob in, but we just lost Bob again. They won't let him talk, for God's sakes. I wanted to have him talk about the MUFON Russian sample that came. What do you know about that, Josh?
Sure. So everything I know about the MUFON Russian sample, I learned from Bob Spearing. So it would be really great if we can get him back in here.
Hopefully we will.
I've read the report that PRA prepared for MUFON and for Bob. So originally, Bob was sent a sample of material from a Russian man with the claim that it showed up on a desk in his apartment in Russia. And this was a small piece of, I'm pretty sure, black material. And when they attempted to mail it to MUFON in the first place, it went to a P.O. box that was under MUFON's control. And when it made it to that P.O. box, apparently the cameras at the mail post office were turned around and the sample was stolen. The first sample was stolen.
These things just happen, even the best of post office.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Cameras being
quite
turned.
interesting that someone was interested in that sample enough and had enough access that they were able to see emails and obtain access to post offices. I have some theories about that I won't get into on the air. A second sample was hand delivered to Bob at a MUFON conference, and Bob had it sent to a Australian laboratory called PRA. PRA did analysis of this material, and in their report, they've determined that it is a unknown sourced aerogel that has no human manufacturer or paper or industrial process would be making aerogel with the same specifications. I think I've frozen now.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we can still hear you.
I looked
Go ahead, Josh. We still hear you.
And it's a great, for a frozen picture, Josh, it's really a good shot.
Perfect.
It's an action shot. It really is.
So this material had also, in addition to not having any human process that would have created it, it had been exposed to cosmic rays, which tells you that it has been in space before ending up back on that table in Russia. And at this point, since Bob's here, I'm going to hand it over to him and try to reset my camera.
Bob, the MUFON sample that we talked about. Bob, can you hear me? Man, I'll tell you, they do not want us to talk about this aerogel. I have never seen this happen.
Bob, start giving it to us in hand signals, please. Pantomime to the camera if you can hear me. There, there's the hand signals. We know we still have them.
Sure. Testing, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
we can hear you now.
Okay, good. Something really weird happened with my modem. All of a sudden, a third motor router address that almost looked like mine popped up, but it had one extra number in it. And I absolutely believe somebody was trying to mimic my motor router address to get me to log into another system. All right. So that's not cool. Anyway, while I'm still here, essentially in 2023, this fellow named Arkady Grushenkov in Moscow filed the MUFON case. And in the case, he said that he had come into possession of a sample while doing CE5 meditations in his living room. And he believed that the stuff was materializing around him over the course of a week. Initially, he vacuumed it up, threw some of it away, but it kept materializing. And as we got into it, interviewing him via email, he said that the material, he came into telepathic contact with an alien named Timothy, and Timothy told him this was debris from his craft that crashed on Earth 12,000 years ago. So MUFON, looked at this as a typical contactee type report, something that's unverifiable. But he said, "Oh no, I have samples of it. And I'd like to send them to your MUFON lab." So at the time, the Ukrainian war had started, and he couldn't send them directly to the United States, this sample. So he had to send it via Turkey to the lab in Missouri, and we got it. Along with the sample, he sent 2 lab reports from laboratories in Moscow. And both of the lab reports I had translated by a fellow in my community who's Russian. And essentially, there were 8 identified elements in it that comprised 10% of the sample. The rest of the sample they could not identify. The second laboratory basically said the same thing. Our lab in Missouri hit it with a X-ray fluorescence gun, and we could not identify anything in it. So at this point, we start to think, hey, this is unusual. We don't know what it is. We're not saying it's alien. We don't know how the guy got it. Did it really materialize in the guy's bedroom, living room? So we wanted to present it at the MUFON Symposium. So I asked our chief lab tech, could you send it to me certified? to my mailbox. Now, I live in the Pocono Mountains in Pennsylvania. They're all like vacation communities. So I don't have mail delivered to my house. It gets delivered to a row of mailboxes in a mail room. The outside of the vestibule area is run by the community. The backside is run by the United States Postal Service. So I get the electronic receipt.
Well, we just lost Bob again.
Oh,
Man, they are screwing with us. Josh, let's change it. We'll pivot until Bob comes back. I want to talk about the secret history of Project Walrus. You mentioned some. I don't know anything about Project Walrus. Can you explain to the listeners what Project Walrus is all about?
Sure. Project Walrus was the 2000s era DARPA program that was designing a hybrid ultralight lifting vehicle, which is essentially an airship that's capable of carrying cargo. And what the Department of Defense at the time wanted was the ability to load up an entire military base onto planes, trains, automobiles, airships. However you could do it, they wanted the ability to move an air base or a military base at a moment's notice to anywhere in the world. And DARPA decided that the only way to do that was with airships. So they spent a lot of money developing airships through the 2000s. And it actually built off of, as I mentioned, all of this earlier airship progress from 1905 through to 2000 was built upon to create these new versions. So in the 1990s, we had DARPA Project Sentinel, which was also investigating airships. In the 1970s, a company named Raven Industries was working with the Department of Energy to develop a craft called Pobal C, which was a airship that stayed up in the air for 30 days on station to conduct reconnaissance. So we've taken all of that century of progress and we've ended up with this DARPA Project Walrus. And Walrus made an airship that has actually entered commercial production as the Airlander 50. And if you go to England, there's an airship company that is actually doing airship travel now on these DARPA Project Walrus airships.
When they're not crashing.
And they're not crashing. Yep. They've done some successful tests of it. They've entered production. They've got a expanded production base that they're bringing actual industrial production back into a Western country, which is fascinating in and of itself. And so this program happened mostly in secret. So these were airships that were made by contractors for DARPA with U.S. taxpayer money, and Congress, as we've all heard, the complaints of several of these congressmen, didn't have a ton of idea of what was being worked on because the DARPA, Department of Energy, and Department of Defense / Department of War have decided that Congress doesn't need, deserve, or get oversight over these programs anymore, even though it's taxpayer money that's funding them. And that's the constitutional crisis that we're seeing right now, is that more and more of these programs that don't necessarily need to be hidden, like an airship program that's eventually going to have commercial travel variants of itself. Why are we hiding oversight of that from Congress unless we're trying to do things that Congress would not approve of?
Right. I'm a layperson at this, but I'm trying to wrap my head around how do you move an entire base by air? I mean, you got to
load it up into a lot of cargo containers.
Yeah, still, you have to. Okay, you got to move the base, you got to move the cooks, you got to move the all that stuff. You got to move the mechanics, you got to move the tools and equipment. I mean, how would you be able to do that without one? I'm sure your satellites would see it. Enemy satellites would see the move, and two, the logistics of it would take months. Don't you think?
The logistics of it would take months, but if you were able to load that weight onto these airships, and some of them were being designed to carry up to 100 tons of cargo. So if you've got a bunch of these cargo containers loaded onto one of these airships, you can fly anywhere you want. You don't have to follow roads. You don't have to have an airport to land at the other side. When you get to where you want to quote unquote land this military base, your airship hovers over the site and lowers the cargo containers down to the ground, lowers the passengers down to the ground while it remains in the air.
I'm going to bring Commander in on this because, I was a big fan of comic books. Get this, I'm talking to these guys here who know about planes. I got to reference a comic book,
Nothing wrong with that, Chris.
Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. Do you ever think the time would come that we would actually have a base in the air? I
think you're focusing on the words and you're not seeing the concept. We're not talking about moving the buildings, Chris. We're talking about everybody puts their gear and their kit into standardized containers. What do we do now? We do this on C-17s. It's just that it takes us a lot of C-17 flights to move this material. It takes a lot of time, and you have to go to an airport. The advantage here, this is the same concept of using SpaceX and SpaceX type things where you put a group of Marines and you put them on any point on the planet, and you now have a rocket that will land vertically in that spot. You need a spot of about 30 square feet to land a SpaceX type rocket and unasked Marines to go do their job. You can resupply them. They're talking about doing this at sea now, where you're going to put rockets to resupply ships. Why do that? You can't shoot them down easily, especially when they're in remote areas. So if you're, everyone says, well, how did we ever get to where we are? Well, if you think back to World War II, and this thing about nuclear energy was being discussed, not just the bomb part, but the amount of energy that was bunkered in a small space. What really pushed that along, not from the munition standpoint, was the United States Navy. They got wind of there was a capability that in a very small space, you could put an energy source that did not require you to ever get up to an oiler and put fuel onto a ship to make it drive. Now, because of that, the Navy took the lead and busted their butts to figure out how to make ships run on nuclear reactors. We don't have the most efficient way of doing it, but they have created a energy source that allows you to drive a ship for years to go do that. The same kind of thing is happening here. Using an airship, when you'd say, well, that's 1900s technology, doesn't mean it's not efficient. Doesn't mean it doesn't fit the need. Doesn't mean that it's tactically proof in every area. But the ability to go to any point on the planet, given you have the conditions that make it worthwhile attempting that.
That's amazing.
Well, let's suppose here for a moment.
Go ahead, Dan.
Excuse me. That you had a gas other than hydrogen or helium. You were able to manufacture something that had higher lifting properties. And then you put it into one of these walrus, I think it's also called hula. Bill, would you pop those up, please? I have some pictures of what these aircraft look like as far as getting them around. This is an artist's conception of one. You can see that they're absolutely massive and can probably lift an incredible amount of cargo. And just the logistical advantage of being able to drop this down vertically You wouldn't even have to lower them by, a string or whatever. You could land the thing, lower a ramp, and have the tanks drive right off it. That would be an incredible strategic and tactical advantage. Now, this URL that I put up here is a company that does some of these organic autonomous vehicles. And as we scroll through this, and Bill, go ahead and hit that arrow and scroll down. Look at these configurations that they're coming up with, and just scroll on down through these, and you'll see that now these are some of these are downright tiny. They're less than a foot. You could easily see that some of these could be mistaken for a UAP or some other type of an aircraft. These are more conventional ones. If we keep going, advancing through, you'll start to see some of them like this. This little thing is designed to fly into a building and fly around inside the building. It's got what looks like solar cells. That's the Kestrel that we looked at there. And this last one, just look how tiny it is. We're going to have the ability to get into some tight places. And I have no doubt that we're going to see more and more of these things being reported by people as UAP.
Padre, I think I've said this in front of you on the previous show.
Mm-hmm.
This is all great, and I'm glad that there's websites. This is not; they don't even scratch the surface of what they're up to. Okay, this is all cotton candy.
That's what's made it into the public.
This is all sleight of effing hand that you're going through.
Mm-hmm.
I remember in the late 90s, early 2000s, a couple of remote control helicopter guys who probably had a full set of teeth between the two of them showed up at an exercise that I was at. And I don't say that from derision. They just didn't have good dental care. They could fly an RC. They could fly an RC airplane and helicopter better than I've seen anybody to do this. So with this gasoline-powered RC helicopter, they had mounted a very, very simple camera on board it. This is before cell phones were really where they are today. They're flying this thing around. They're flying it around at an urban warfare training center, with buildings and windows and stuff going on. This thing made a lot of noise. And they flew it up to like a second or third floor window. You had a really crappy picture, but you could actually see a picture back on this system where they were at. And when they saw what match the target was inside the window, basically a mannequin was there, they flew this thing in it and it exploded. And how it exploded, they had put a charge onto the fuel tank. So with the kinetics and the fuel going into a small room, they caught this thing on fire, and it was a pretty good chance they had taken it out. This is before any of the stuff that we're all fantasizing about. This was just a couple of guys from the Appalachians who could really fly RCs, probably grew up duck hunting and doing it, and just threw all the kit together and made this happen.
Okay, so speak to me on this issue. I was listening to a podcast with an innovator, and he's on these cutting edge unmanned systems. I forget what the name of the company was. And he says that all across the country right now, you have guys, brilliant guys with computers and materials in their garages making the next generation of cutting edge strategic and tactical things for the military. But because of the way the structure is set up, they can't get their stuff in front of the Pentagon for demonstration.
I'm going to give you a 50-50 on that. And I'm going to tell you, without giving away anything that I'm not supposed to give away because of NDAs.
Mm-hmm.
I have a number of companies that I pro bono talk to, and they have a really great idea, and they want to go do this. And then I will go in with a pin and start bursting their bubbles, bursting their balloons, so to speak, since we're going to keep it in the flavor of tonight's topics of what's going on. Another perfect pun.
I like that.
Part. Thank you. Thank you for the applause.
That's the only thing I got tonight was that. I'm pretty proud of myself.
Stop inflating his ego.
Thank you. Thank you. That whistling sound will be the air. The
That was
special gas
his ego. He had to drop down to my level in order for me to understand it.
So one of the things is these tinkerers, these innovators, these people who are doing it, they have a concept, but vast majority of people haven't been around a military application. In fact, I'm going to say a lot of people actually haven't had fairly standard job experience to fall against in the kind of economy that we have now. We actually have to make something work. You have to be told it's a good idea, but it doesn't really fit anything. And the other guilty party here is the military. There's not, if it's not completely packaged, if it hasn't come from a big name, a lot of people aren't interested. Now, the people who are interested are outfits like the Marines or Special Forces or Special Operations Troops. The Space Force looks at stuff slightly differently. That's why these have had to break out. I know Don's not here because in Don's world, the Army would still have the Air Force and we still be flying B-29s because that's how it works. Right? And I'm sure I'm going to have to eat a certain amount of caca at the end of that for that remark. But the separation didn't help. In many areas, we went off the rails in different areas. So my point on this is, when I sit down with these people, these innovators, I tell them it has to work. One of them has an incredible aircraft, but what they wanted was a guy like me who had actually flown helicopters, and they wanted to be able to have an aircraft that could single pilot, fly, and pick up downed aircrew. That requires an incredible amount of engineering. Their theory was you would fly to the spot, computer aided, the door would automatically open, and the hoist would lower down. Sounds simple. Here's the problem. You got a hoist hanging outside of it. I gave him a quick calculation. You just lost 15% of the speed that you were planning on getting because aerodynamically you left this thing outside. And now, how do you get this thing to go up and down? How is that happening? So now we have an automatic door. Then to preserve that speed, to preserve that range, this hoist motor had to come in and come out. Now, when we were done with the computer design, everything that they wanted to do was tactically and engineeringly sound. To actually have a single pilot with a really good computer flight control backup to the pilot so that they could set up the position, and you had a certain supposition that the people on the ground did not require a person to come down and put them into either like a litter or hook them up to get them up into the aircraft. And we talked all that through. A lot of these companies, a lot of these small startups do not have that resource to actually talk. But the services, they're out there. One of the best is the Marines. And I'm going to circle back to something you brought up earlier. I was in the Air Force for 22 plus, I was in the military for 22 plus years. 6 of it in the Air Force, 16 plus in the Coast Guard. I did not know anything about Colonel Johnny Boyd until I started to take a Marine Corps War College course. The Marines revered Boyd. The Air Force didn't say crap about this guy, and he was probably the living day Musashi, the man of 5 rings of our era, because he did not conventionally fit. He was having these calculations in his brain. He was calling BS on aircraft designs. He really, his EM theory is now what is taught in weapons school and in almost every application that you can imagine in aerodynamics and how you energy maneuver your aircraft. But it was the Marines that actually embodied him into their thinking, not for aerodynamics, for how you're going to fight. And now, of course, in the Air Force, he's completely revered or at least talked about, but it's not even the proper application of it. What is put out as Boyd's theory does not have a complete living entity that is happening in there with this orientation that's going on. And why I bring that up is it goes back further to what we said before. It's all interconnected, but we don't like the interconnection. What you end up talking about is, I need something. Okay, so you're going to plan, you're going to brief, you're going to execute, and you're going to debrief. Boyd, that's Boyd. I got it. I am now an OODA loop guy. I know everything about it. I'm sorry, you're wrong. I'm going to call BS because you're not looking at the entire thing that he put down. You're not reading creation and destruction. You're not looking at why he looked at philosophy and thermodynamics. That is the problem with this. We're looking for the packaged answer, and you're not getting it that way. You have to be able to go forward and say, what is the entire system that we're looking at? So to circle back, these independent folks out there, they're in the best country on the globe to have a chance to go forward. And as long as we don't get eaten up by too many venture capitalists and too many big DOD outfits, it's going to break through.
You see it going commercialized? Do you see this technology? Let me ask Josh this. Josh, do you see this technology becoming more and more commercialized, or just kept into black projects?
Well, on August 8th of 2025, the U.S. government's General Services Admin put the contract for aerogel vacuum lighter than aircraft out as a tender to aerospace companies with greater than 1,000 employees. So it's not going to go to the little guy. It's going to go to one of the prime aerospace contractors. And yeah, they literally last month they put it out for tender and said.
And a prime out there with 1,000 more is going to go out and find 3 or 4 small companies,
and they're going to buy them up.
They're working out, and they're going to either put them on as subs, or they're going to buy them.
Yep.
Unbelievable. You know, this has been a fascinating.
Well, it's not necessarily bad, Chris. I'm not saying it's necessarily
how it's worked for 100 years.
Because lots of small companies do not have the resources, do not have the legs to go forward. But there is a negative downside to our system, because it will go to a point where someone's looking for a profit, or they're looking for what they can run on it, and they don't connect to the ultimate mission end of it.
Sure.
As the old expression used to be. It doesn't have to work. It just has to be bought.
So we're almost out of time. This has been an unbelievable show. Josh, thank you so much for being on. We're not done yet, but we got just minutes. So I want to go around the table. And Padre, I want to start with you. Technology, everything you heard tonight, what's your feelings?
Well, it's always exciting. I'm a innovation nerd, and I'm pleased when I hear about these innovations. But Josh, we got to have you back, because there's so much more that I know I want to ask you. I'm sure the other guys are the same. That this is a fascinating field, and I want to thank you for being with us here tonight.
Oh, thank you too, Dan.
Josh, your final thoughts on stuff.
I'm just happy to talk about this stuff. It's a pretty niche topic, so when people are interested in it, I can talk your ear off, and I'm happy to come back and talk to you guys in the future.
Yeah,
maybe get some more questions.
I got to do some reading. I'm going to call you beforehand so I can do some
Definitely.
reading.
Hey, Josh,
Is that what I'm talking about?
are horror movie monsters good at math?
Some of the time.
Not unless you count Dracula.
Haha, 1, 2, 3.
Oh my word.
Okay.
And next time we get together, we're going to talk about Chinese balloon over Yemen, Hellfire missile bouncing off.
We were going to talk about
the Chinese balloon was Project DARPA, Project Walrus Tech, and the Chinese stole it and sent it over our own country.
So that was a balloon that they shot at.
It was early variants, but yeah, that's from our own technology chain. They sent it right back at us.
All right, folks, you got the primer for the next show. That's going to be the opener. I'm on a couple weeks of trouble. I'm going to try to make the show, but Josh, we're going to have to get back, because you and I, we're agreeing on this one.
Perfect.
So,
I look forward to talking to all of you in the future. This has been a great discussion.
Well, it's a mutual admiration society, but it's well earned.
Thank you.
Well, folks, we're about ready to wrap it up. We got about 30 seconds. I'm going to give my final thought here. Josh, you've been a great guest, a world of information. Love to hear what you have to say. I wish I could understand half of it. I didn't, but it was very entertaining. It's like, me going to PhD class on astrophysics to sit there going, okay, what's this all about? But I will promise you the next time I'll be more prepared for everything that you have to bring up. I'm going to drill you like there's no tomorrow. But anyways, folks, what a great guest. And, that's our show for the week. And thank you, Josh, for being on. Too bad we didn't get Bob Spirian. I think the 3-letter agencies are messing with him right now. Because every time he mentions something about a piece of metal or something, he disappears from sight. So
I'm going to say it's the United States Postal Service. They're after him. And he's on the wrong side. Because when you control the mail, you control information. Seinfeld.
Angry postal inspectors.
All right, folks. That's our show for tonight. Have a great night. For all of us, stay safe and good night.